What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today is the day I want to do something I have been needing to do and wanting to do for a while, but I've been so busy on the green truck I really haven't had time to mess with this. So I want to build a press brake for the Harbor Freight. I think it's a 20 ton. I want to build a press brake for it to be able to bend metal. So I got everything right here we need to build it. Let's check it out and get to work. So here's everything I got. I actually had that sitting out back. That's why it is so old and rusty, but it's a good 4-inch, quarter-inch wall square tube that I'm going to use for the bottom. This angle iron is going to be the bottom piece, which I'm going to cut that about in half and weld that directly to this angle iron here. Then I have 1-inch ID tube or DOM tubing, and then this round stock 1-inch, so that will slide inside of there. I'm going to use that on either end for the guides, and then the main ram, or the main piece that comes down to a point and in the center, is going to be this 3-inch, and then this 2-inch. This is all 1/2-inch plate, by the way. This 2-inch is going to be like that on top. And then over here, forgot to grab it out, this tube here I am going to weld on the top of, basically I'm going to call it the ram. On the top of the ram, this is going to go over the top of that post there. I'm going to thread it and put a bolt in there so it stays connected to this top bar. So what we got to do is, I don't know if this is perfectly, this was 2 foot. I might have to trim it down. Yeah, we're gonna have to cut a couple inches out of it. That's gonna sit inside of there. So we gotta do some cutting, cut all this stuff down, and get to work building this thing. All right, guys, we are making some progress. Everything is cut, ready to start tacking together. So this is the top piece. This is going to weld something like that. That is the piece that's going to go up into that main ram on the jack there, and then I'm going to weld that nut on so I can thread that in and lock this upper piece into the actual movable arm on that press. So the rest of this is going to be a little tricky, because if we are off just even 1/8 of an inch, these aren't going to slide. So this is a very, very tight fit with a 1-inch DOM tube and then the 1-inch solid stock. It is, I had to sand it. You guys saw me sand it down just to be able to get it to fit. So we got it fitting really, really good. But what I'm gonna have to do is kind of put the whole thing together. That way everything is lined up perfectly, and then I'll tack it together and weld it while everything is together. These tubes here are going to weld onto the side right there, and they're going to slide up and down obviously on here. So should be pretty easy. But I also got a level out. Just got the level of the table 1.5, and then we'll just do that, get it at 1.5 and tack it together. So should be pretty easy. Let's start tacking this stuff together. All right, we got this thing all tacked together. It is working pretty good, other than one little issue is it's kind of binding when it gets just a little bit sideways with these tubes being so tight. You can see you kind of got to wiggle it back and forth to get it down, and especially up top here, it's a bit of a pain in the butt. So what I think I'm going to do to help that, well, I know for a fact once we weld these in and these posts aren't moving at all, I think that'll definitely help. But another thing I want to do is lengthen these tubes just so there's more. I'll probably go about 1 inch, just so there's more tube on that shaft, especially where you're actually using this press at the bottom. If I can get this thing back down. See, it's not too bad once you get going down, but like I said, lengthen these about 1 inch just so there's more tube. And I think once these are welded, and I'm going to grease these, obviously I'm not going to be able to get any paint or anything on these shafts just because it's such a tight fit in there. But I think some grease and a little bit longer and being fully welded in, I think all 3 of those will solve that problem. So let's cut some longer tubes, get those ready, snip those off and tack them in place. All right, we got these tacked in, and honestly, it seems like it made that catching issue worse. It's even caught right at the bottom there. So I might be thinking about this backwards. I'm gonna try like little short tubes, maybe like 1 inch. That way there's just a lot less leverage, I guess you could say, with the tube length and it catching. I don't know, it's worth a shot. I got extra tubes, so I'm gonna cut, like I said, probably about 1 inch length of these tubes and tack those on and try that. I just want to make sure that this thing works smoothly before I go and fully weld it. Then I'm cutting it apart. I want to avoid that. So let's try this, see if we can get this to work. All right, we got this thing in the press. I got these short tubes welded in and it was still binding, but I think I found a solution. What I'm gonna do is add some supports on each end up here to this main beam. That way there's no chance that this main ram here can get sideways and cockeyed and jam these up. And it's also going to help if you get something that you put in here not centered. Say if you press here, this is just going to go sideways, jam these up, and you're probably going to bend the tool and it's not going to work. So with having a brace on each side, you could literally put anything you want wherever in this press brake and it won't jam up. So I'm going to get some tube. I might just use this smaller stuff there and then weld a plate on top for more surface area to kind of spread out the load so you don't just bend this tube. So that should work pretty good. Once we get those in, we'll test it again, see if we need to add longer tubes here. Like I said, I have those other ones, so I might just weld those longer ones back in because it seemed like it worked better with the longer ones, but we'll get these supports in and then figure out what to do with these side tubes. All right, we got these posts going up. We got those tacked in place. So I just got some scrap steel. I'm gonna do a couple bends real quick. I wanna do some on each side. Make sure it's not catching at all anywhere. If I need to make any more adjustments, if all is well, we can start welding this thing together. Well guys, I've done a few bends. I did this 1/8 inch. And you can see you could actually get over 90 degrees. There's that other little bend. That's another bend I started and then I moved. But you can see 3/16 right here. That is over a 90-degree bend, which I think why it goes over 90 is because I did such a sharp point on the ram there. It actually bends more than 90 degrees, so that's going to be very helpful. Everything seems to be working good. It hasn't jammed up at all, so these supports up here definitely made this thing work a lot better. It doesn't, you can't put something on the side here because this entire ram up top moves side to side. It's got some pressure on it now, but it doesn't have anything to do with bolting this to this. This entire bar moves because it's just, you know, kind of loosely hung over this with springs to hold it centered. So that's not going to work. You're still going to have to center your work over the middle of this jack. So not a big deal. Let's pull this thing off and get it completely welded in. All right, we got this thing fully welded, but we got a slight issue. We don't slide anymore, and I cannot get these off. They can't get these two separated like I figured. As soon as I started welding these main posts in down here, they must have pulled out or something, and I can't get it off. So what I'm going to do to get this thing apart and fixed is I'm just going to put a cut down each of these on the outside just to loosen up the tension here so I can get it apart. And I'm going to weld. I still got these ones. I'm going to trim these down. I'll probably make these a lot longer anyway. I kind of wanted to either way. So I'm going to get these things cut off, get these probably cut in half and weld it on. And if I do have to straighten these posts out, I will do that. But I don't know, we'll see once we get these tacked together, these new posts, see if they will slide on there at all. And this isn't a uncommon problem at all. Every time you weld something, it pulls a certain way. Say if you were to put a bead on the outside here, it would pull that way. So it is not uncommon. I figured this would happen. So we're gonna go through the steps to fixing it. All right, we got these new side tubes welded in and this thing's working great. So what I want to try, I want to bend some more, make sure we're all good before we go powder coat it. Also, I'm kind of curious if I can throw a shorter or a smaller piece of angle in here like that to get a tighter bend. This is kind of it's not a super tight bend on this angle here. So I'm going to do a bend with that. I'll throw this in, I'll do another bend just to see if it gives you a more sharp, tighter bend. I have actually seen people step up from like 2.5 to 2 to 1.5 inches to do this on one of these press brakes to get a tighter bend. So let's try it out. I got some 1/4 inch there. I might have to find some other stuff to try a couple other bends, but let's see what we can do. All right, so far so good, no jamming up, working really good. So here's a few bends I did. This one in the front was with that shorter or that smaller angle iron. You can see it is a tighter bend, so not too bad. It's still not super tight, but it definitely does the job. You can see it's probably going to scratch up the powder coat, but I'm not honestly too worried about that. I just want to keep the rust off of the majority of it. So if there's some of it scratched off down here or on this main piece here, it's not a huge deal, but let's get this thing in the sandblaster, get the rest of this rust blasted off, and then we can powder coat it. There we go, guys. We are done, powder coated, all looking good. And I will say the grease helped out so much with this thing. Letting it slide, it doesn't really jam up at all anymore. So happy that is not binding anymore. And like I said, with these two posts up against the arm of the actual press, it does a lot better. It doesn't jam up at all. So very happy with how it turned out. I can't wait to tackle the next project and see what we can do with this thing. Well, like always, go check out prismaticpowders.com. I'll drop a link down in the description box. The color we used on this press brake is called Stone Black. I'll have that linked as well. Go check it out, prismaticpowders.com. Amazing prices, amazing powders, lightning fast shipping. What more do you want? Go check them out. Oh, and I want to comment on one other thing. If you guys are going to build this press brake, get tube that's a little bit bigger, and there's actually a little bit of playroom for the sides for the guides. You definitely want a little bit of playroom, because even just a little bit of heat from welding, it moves stuff around quite a bit. Well, that's a wrap for this video. Really hope you enjoyed it. Go smash that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe. We'll see you guys in the next one.